Alright, what's going on, guys? We're going to do another 1600 build here. Some guys are tired of these and other guys are asking for them. So apparently I had a bunch of videos that got lost, and I'll try to replace those videos with a couple builds. So here's a 1600 that we got. 1600 dual port. It's going to be a stocker, stock cam, stock. So what we have here is the cam installed in the motor with the bearings, and I like to do this. I don't know if I've ever showed this part or not. I'll take and put the pump in the motor with the gears in there, of course, and the cam installed. And let me see if I can get zoomed in here and get the right shot for you to show you what we're looking for. Alright, we get a light. Oh, sorry, cat. Can't stop those feet once they start moving, man. But anyway, what you're looking for is the distance between the oil pump and the cam. You want to make sure your drive flange is fully engaged in the flat of the cam. Turn the cam a little bit, make sure that it's in there good. Sometimes what you'll have to do is push this rod in a little bit if you have a dish cam to where it gets full contact with the camshaft to drive the pump. You want to make sure that you have full contact, because when the pump stops working, it's never good. You can see there's quite a bit of play on these. And this one has excessive, but I think they're pretty much all like that. The slot on the cam is quite a bit bigger than the drive on the pump, this part. And sometimes they'll have a little play in the cam back and forth like this, and there's really not a whole lot you can do with that. If you're real meticulous and you want to make it nicer, you can weld that flat up and fit it to the slot in the cam, but you don't want to get it too tight. It needs to have some sort of play in there. You do want to make sure that the gear's not out here like this. You want to make sure that the flat's fully engaged in the slot on the cam though. So we're good on this one. We're going to put this off to the side. This will be the pump we're going to use. I got a plethora of oil pumps up here. I'm going to try to build like 2 or 3 motors. So let me get you set back up and unzoom you. So anyway, next we'll put the rods on this crankshaft. And that's really what I wanted to get done in this video, is the crank. So let me put this case off to the side here. And we're going to put our rods on next. A little bit of Earl on the crank. Again, I don't like assembly lube. It changes the way the parts feel. If you got a draggy, you're not going to be able to feel that with the assembly lube. So just use some mild Earl, whatever you're going to run in the motor. Remember, when you put the rods on, you have 2 tangs. You have the bearing tangs, one right here, and the other tang is in the cap right there. Tang to tang. Always tang to tang. There should be a tang here and a tang on the other side every time. And 90% of the engines you'll build, the tangs will point down towards the camshaft. So that, what I mean by that is the tang's never pointing up in the sky. It's always pointing down. This is number 2 rod. Would be the first rod that you come to on the crank. And Volkswagen has these bumps to identify the top of the rod. So if you don't have the bump, if the rod's been polished, remember the tang always goes down. So this will be our first rod. Go ahead and put this on there. You can use Loctite if you like on the rod nuts. I used to use Loctite all the time. I ran into a small problem with it once and I haven't used it since. Loctite is very hard. And if you get too much Loctite and it escapes from the threads, it can cause you some issues in the bearings if it gets into them. So I stopped using the Loctite and I haven't had any issues from not using it. Volkswagen has a little washer on the bottom of the rod nut I'll show you. And after you get it all torqued, you can take a hammer and a chisel and notch that washer. That's how they do it from the factory. There's no Loctite on the rod nut from the factory. So we're gonna go ahead and set our torque wrench now at 27 foot-pounds. Get over in the light here. You can look these torque specs up online. I have them in my head. You will never see me use a book on this channel for Volkswagen stuff, just because I've got it in my head, and I'm going with that. So 27 foot-pounds is what you want here. These rods are resized. They got 2.5 thousandths rod clearance. This is a brand new crank, brand new Brazilian Volkswagen crank. So let's I'll show you the little trick here. You'll see the little notch on the rod. You see this little notch right here, and your nut will stop. The nut has a washer on the bottom of it, and you take the punch and put a little divot right there in the washer. And in theory, that was Volkswagen's way of locking the rod nut. So there's your washer on the bottom of the nut. It's like a little ring. You can see where it's probably been pinged one time somewhere. This one hasn't, so it's had new bolts and never been properly fastened. Like I said, you just go right in that notch and give it a little tap on that little lock sleeve, and it just puts a little tab there and locks the bolt. All right, so your number 2 rod is on. Now when you do this in sequence, number 2 is always over towards the, you're sitting behind the motor, it'll be on the passenger side rear. And these bumps will all be at the top, and they'll go separate ways. So our next rod, the bump will be this way. Our next rod, the bump will be that way. And our next rod, the bump will be this way. So you just want to make sure your bumps correspond the right way on the rods as you're going down the crank. Again, thin coat of oil, no assembly lube. I really don't recommend it because it will make the parts very hard to read. Two nuts here. You're going to have a problem with your motor. You want to feel it in the assembly. You don't want to put the motor together and have to put 2 batteries on it to crank it over to get it running. So, the motor shouldn't be tight when it's new. It should fire right up. And a lot of times when you put all that assembly lube in there, it plugs up the clearances and you can't get any oil into the motor. And you can cause some problems. So that's another reason I don't like to use the lube. These rods are rebuilt, balanced end to end. I didn't want them balanced end to end, but I got them back that way. Make sure everything's free. Simple and free. Happy. That hurt. There we go. Just a little tap's all it takes. Okay, so we got 2. We got our other here. Those cats are after you, girl. We got the VW drag nights coming up this weekend, and maybe try to make that show. Take a couple motors with me, see if I can sell some stuff, and go check out some cars. Not going to be racing, but probably be a good race to spectate at. Get to see all the cars up close. I didn't really get to see a whole lot last time I went, so gonna try to go to that if the financial situation lets me. Anyway, one more to go after this one, and then we'll work on our gears next. Some of the later model nuts do not have the ring on them. You want to make sure the nut has the ring for this before you do this. Then you're putting a little divot in the ring, not the nut itself. Last rod. Alrighty. Alrighty. So that's pretty much it. Volkswagen crank assembly. We'll heat our gears up, put our bearing on here. Another trick you can do if you guys are looking for a little more dependability, this front bearing is it's aluminum construction. Doesn't matter what kit you buy it out of. This front bearing is always less than luster. It does its job for sure, but another trick if you don't want to use this circle bearing on the front behind the gears, and if you don't mind buying 2 bearing sets, you can use the center main bearings in the front, and these are steel backed, so you get a much more robust bearing. This will fit in the case just fine. And it eliminates that circle bearing there, and this is a much more robust bearing. So if you're doing a high performance motor, this is almost always a must. You know, buy 2 bearing sets and put your split bearing in the front also, or the rear, however you look at the crank. So that's that on the crank. We got the case going, we got our pistons over here, we got to balance those. We got one at 440 and the heaviest one at 449, so they're 9 grams off. I balance all my engines, so we'll do that next. Like I said, these rods had new bushings installed and they were balanced end to end. I don't know why. I have one set that's balanced end to end and another set that's just rebuilt. You know, they did the spalling and the big end and put them in some bags, and these were all fancy when I got them back for the same price. So I don't know. So that's where we're at. We'll go ahead and shut this video down. Hope you enjoyed it. That's the installing the rods on the 1600 crankshaft. 27 foot-pounds is what we torqued our nuts to. And remember your orientation on your rods. This is number 2. So further cylinder forward on the passenger side towards the rear of the motor or the pulley, or the front of the engine, however you want to refer to it. Some people refer to as the flywheel as the front of the motor. When you're sitting behind the motor, this will be the first cylinder on the passenger side, number 2. And we have our bump up, the opposite way, bump up. You know, tangs down towards the cam. And if you do it that way, you're gonna find yourself not getting in trouble. If you get the rod on backwards, what it does is the rods are preloaded to the cylinder to keep the piston from slapping. One of the racing tricks we used to do in the stocker classes, we'd put all the rods on backwards and unload all the cylinders. Takes all the preload off the cylinders, makes the motor rattle, but it does make a little more power. But this is a complete stock motor, so we're not going for any of that trickery here. So oil pumps, we could probably go over the oil pumps. You know, you want to make sure you get the biggest oil pump you can get. We're using a 30 millimeter pump on this motor. Usually I use a 32 or, you know, a big pump. There's a couple pumps that I won't use. So here's the one pump that I don't like is this this deal here. And it's got some really monster gears in it. You can see the gears are very robust, you know, and it's not a half bad looking pump. This is what they call a filter pump. And it incorporates the pump and the filter together. And this is good if you're in a northern climate, because this oil filter is mounted right next to the exhaust, so it heats the oil up for you. But if you're in the warm weather climates, this might not be a good idea for you. So if you want a filter on your car, you should probably go with a full flow system and mount the filter away from the heat, and put a full flow cover on here where you can incorporate an oil cooler also and a filter. So don't care for the filter pumps. And we talked about the bus mount the other day. If you have to do the bus mount in a bug, or a bug motor in a bus, this is a good pump to buy. This is a cast iron pump, and this pump has a lot less distortion when you're hanging the motor off of it than the aluminum pumps. A lot of the purists don't like the milling cast iron high volume pump. It's one of my favorites. They do work well, and they'll never leave you without oil pressure. Some people say they leak because they're dissimilar metals, but I haven't found that to be true. So yeah, a good pump. This is a brand new Shattuck high volume pump. Should say HD on it somewhere. I don't see it anywhere, but it's a 30 millimeter pump. And this is for the 2110 build, which we'll be building right after this. I got two 1600s to put together, and then we're going to put the 2110 so I can get these 3 engines done. But anyway, let me turn this off. Here's our crank. And the gears are sort of self-explanatory. I'm not going to make a video on that. They only go in one way. You have your crank gear, which is beveled. The beveled end goes on first, of course. Your timing marks, half-handed. Anyway, your timing marks will be on the other side. The side that's not beveled will have your timing marks. I like to put a little paint on the timing marks because they can be hard to see. Your bearing will go on first, then your crank gear, then your distributor gear, your spacer between the 2 gears, and then the snap ring and the oil slinger. So, I have to take that inside to heat that up on the hot plate. So that's where we're at on that. I heat the gear up. A lot of guys press them on. I like to heat them because you don't lose the crush that way. But that's it. I'm going to try to keep these short so I can turn this off and get it loaded up for you. And hopefully that helps somebody.